welcome to this first episode of Biz Tech Talk, hosted by Forbes Middle East in partnership with GBM. My name is Jessie Moore, and I am delighted to be the moderator of this session. Today, we're discussing cloud technology adoption. Have businesses been able to use this technology only as a rescue strategy during the challenges and complications that were adopted during COVID-19? Or have they succeeded, whether in the private or public sectors, to use it as a long-term strategy to grow their businesses or their services? Now, most businesses in the MENA region surveyed about cloud technology, also over 80% of businesses in the region have said that they plan on using and adopting cloud technology in their businesses or in their services. Today, I am joined by a group of experts that bring together years of experience in the technology, in the healthcare, in the banking sectors, as well as the public sector. So allow me to first welcome Mbarka Ibrahim, who is the IT Director at the Ministry of Health and Prevention. Mbarka brings with her an impressive career spanning over 20 years, mixing or at the crossroad of IT and healthcare. She also describes these two fields as her passion. Welcome, Mbarka. I also welcome Yuri Misnik, who is the Group CTO at First Abu Dhabi Bank. He also brings together over 20 years of experience in technology, having worked in both technology and banking sectors for big corporations like Microsoft and HSBC. Welcome, Yuri. I'd also like to welcome Ahmed Al-Hamadi, who is the IT Director at Abu Dhabi Municipality. He has over a decade of experience working in the IT, specifically in the government sector, with strategic goals or where he focuses on digital services, minimizing service delivery time, and staff efficiency. Welcome, Ahmed. Bassam Rashid is the Director of Digital Business Solution at GBM. He's been with GBM for over 5 years now, and he brings over also a decade of IT experience in the MENA region. He's held different leadership positions with GBM and currently has a comprehensive portfolio working on digital solutions, cognitive analysis, customer experience, and of course, digital automation. Last but not least, Hassan Shaheen is the IBM Cloud Sales Leader for GNL and Pakistan at IBM. He's joined IBM Egypt since 2003 and held various key client-facing positions, of course, across EMEA territory. He's worked with strategic clients in both banking, public sector, telecom, and media. Welcome to all of you. Allow me to start with Mbarka, if you don't mind, because you've been at the forefront of COVID-19 challenges, working within the healthcare industry. Would you say that hospital operators in this region, in MENA, are now ready to adopt the cloud technology, or do the challenges and maybe security risks that we hear about outweigh the benefits?
Well, hello everyone, and thank you for hosting me into this event. For the regulators and the hospitals operators during COVID-19, we've seen that adopting the cloud technology is actually the way going forward, because we're depending too much on the sharing of the data between the entities. Also, we're depending on the data storages that we wanted to have. So the whole data management actually phase has changed. So if you notice lately, according to the reports that came out, that 35% of the health organizations that's actually currently adopting their cloud infrastructure and data is on the cloud. Sorry, the infrastructure and data is actually being hosted on the cloud. And that is actually going to give us a way going forward that the cloud is the best option for us when it comes to sharing of the data. Different angles that we need to look at: the infrastructure readiness, in terms that we have in the UAE. Do we have a sufficient and reliable infrastructure to support the cloud adoption? This is one thing that we need to look into very seriously. Also around the legislation and the regulation readiness. Most of you know that the development when it comes to the regulations, it takes time it's not like the technology advancement, but I would say, fortunately, in the UAE, due to the leadership that United Arab Emirates have already developed several laws and policies that will really help us in how to manage and control the support when it comes to the cloud adoption, the AI, and the rest of the new technologies adoption in the United Arab Emirates. So,
Okay.
yes.
Barka, I'm going to go back to you on the issue of challenges that are being faced by the government sector and specifically the healthcare, and we'll discuss that with Ahmed in a little bit. But allow me to go to Bassam also to give us, Bassam, if you can give us an overview. Now, of course, Barka comes from the healthcare sector, which again has been in the front facing COVID-19, but many companies have already invested in cloud technology before COVID-19. Which sectors would you say have been the largest adopters, and what has been the uptake or the benefits of adopting cloud technology?
Okay, so first of all, thank you all for attending this session, and thank you, Jesse, for hosting us. Now, the adoption of cloud have been on the rise for some time now, and basically it's happening around 3 blocks. The cloud infrastructure, which is public or private cloud or a hybrid model of both, cloud integration and automation services, and generally cloud services like SaaS and all the data and analytics around it. So when the pandemic started, the enterprises that were digitally ready have leveraged these technologies that we were discussing for operation and business continuity purposes. And I would say that the leaders here were obviously the health authority, as just Mubarak was mentioning, and the government and banking sectors, usually through e-channels and e-services. Now, I would say the other industry had to act quickly and react for the same business continuity purposes by prioritizing and accelerating their cloud adoption or cloud journey. So to answer your question, the biggest adopters, I would say education sector have went a long way adopting online learning platforms for distant and blended learning experience. I can see that lots of banks are either exploring or started migrating part of their workloads into cloud due to the elasticity of these services. And in general, all the SMEs that couldn't use to afford enterprise applications in the past are leveraging SaaS when it comes to CRM and ERP and Salesforce automation. Going back to where you started, all the statistics are indicating that the cloud adoption is on the rise. A recent study from IDC is suggesting that the spend in 2020 will exceed $2.8 billion in the META region, which is Middle East, Turkey, and Africa, and it's expected even to cross the $6 billion in 2014. So post-COVID versus pre-COVID, it's a compound annual growth rate from 22% to 24%. So yes, there is an uptake, and yes, it's happening in all the sectors.
Yes, obviously big numbers. And yes, it's unfair. I mean, the healthcare has been at the forefront, but of course, as you mentioned, the education sector, the banking sector, all other sectors are following suit, which will take me now to Yuri. Please, Yuri, you've had such a massive experience and you continue to in the banking sectors. So maybe an IT as well. If I were to ask you, what would be, if we move on to the process, I'm a small company, I'm a medium-sized company. There's a misconception that cloud technology only serves big corporation or big data or big government services. What would you say are the key factors to any business or a company to focus on when they're considering a move to cloud?
Thanks, Jesse. Thanks very much. And thanks for having me here. I think the most important thing is to not to be afraid of this. Realistically speaking, whether you're saying you're using cloud or not, you actually are, because most of you have iPhones. And if you think about Apple was a consumer of, for example, Amazon Web Services and now the other cloud providers for a very long time. So as a consumers, we already are using these services which belong to the big public cloud providers. And when talking about the challenge and how to approach things is, first of all, we need to differentiate between 3 modes of cloud. Yeah, you have infrastructure as a service, You have platform as a service, which is a bit more advanced, but also creates a lot of benefits. And then you have a software as a service, which is probably the most beneficial way of consuming the cloud services, but also requires quite a clear understanding of the business problem and what we're trying to solve. And a few things which I would suggest not to do before I say what to do. One thing is to make sure that don't try to build cloud on your own. Right? It doesn't make sense. The whole idea of the cloud is that you use the scale and the ability of companies with the knowledge and skills to actually provide these services to you, right? And we've seen public cloud providers coming to the market. We also probably will see an emergence of the national cloud providers, which will sort of serve more critical, more specific workloads, whether from the government or from healthcare, so something which is nationally critical as well. So again, from my perspective, is the key thing is to plan, and again, the recommendation would be try to not overcomplicate things. The benefits of the cloud is in the managed part of it. That means when you buy a service, you want to minimize the time and effort you spend in actually running this thing. So for example, if you're buying Microsoft Office 365, right, you're buying collaboration tools, you're buying some antivirus tools, which already managed for you. You don't have to worry about licenses. You don't have to worry about effectively day-to-day operations of this stuff. Same thing about CRM, whether you're buying Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics CRM, Oracle, all of this stuff becomes, this is the biggest value, right? Then you go down the stack into platform or into infrastructure. And the key approach here is to plan, to think what you're trying to achieve, to be very clear in terms of what problems you're trying to solve with the cloud adoption, and just take it step by step. So if you have enough technology in your organization, use it. Technology specialists in your organization, use them. If not, find yourself a partner who understands the cloud and start engaging them.
Okay, great. Basically, Yusri, I'm going to go with your top 2 advice, which is don't be afraid, take the leap, make it simple, plan, use your IT department. I'm going to take all these now to Ahmed, because he's on the government side, or let's say the public sector, who have a lot of concern when it comes to risk and challenges, and they don't have time to, let's say, experiment or try different solutions. So Ahmed, if I were to ask you, how should government services or governments in general manage the risks that we are hearing about of cloud technology before adopting any new tool?
Thank you, Jesse. Government digital infrastructure are similar to private companies. Dealing with sensitive and confidential data, it's harder for government to adopt a cloud solution, especially when the data hosts somewhere else or outside your formal control. In general, cloud technology has covered almost all services, as my colleague says, SaaS and PaaS that the normal IT provides. Different solutions on the cloud are present now to help government adopt cloud services without violating the compliance from our regulators.
Okay, that makes sense. So you're saying there's not much of a difference between public and the private sector when it comes to the mitigating the challenges and the risks. I mean, I will take that to Hassan, please. Hassan, also cloud, of course, as we said, seems to be the new buzzword in technology world since COVID-19 for some sectors. Where do organizations start? So almost the same question to you. Where do they start, and how could they potentially solve challenges before adopting a new tool?
Thank you, Jesse, for having us. And I think all my colleagues have put very, very interesting perspectives, whether you look from the government sector, from the health sector, or from the banking sector. We realize that everybody knows they need to do something, right? And it is always the idea where to start. And I think from an IBM perspective, we always advise people to start slow. So what I resonate what Yuri was saying on planning. Plan and set your goal and invent the wheel. Get the people who really know how to do this and start with it. if we look at the studies now, we know that maybe less than 20% of the workload has moved to the cloud. And I think the easiest workload that moved to the cloud was always the development workload. So you don't take your main system or your main production system. If it's a bank, you don't take your core banking and put it on the cloud, but you take your development part of it. Or if you want to do a new, let's say a new channel, and you want to open it and you want to experiment with it and get the people to understand the culture and the change in the way of doing the business, this is where to start.
So you also resonate with the planning, take it step by step, obviously not to be overwhelmed and not to do everything at once. So let me
Jesse, can I just add to this? I think Hassan's a very important thing. I think education and people part of it is critical, right? Because a lot of the challenges we're seeing, all the industries, whether it's banking, public sector scale, because what we're lacking in many places is the knowledge of the cloud technologies or the cloud provider inside the IT organization. So I think we shouldn't be missing this big part of educating your workforce and your business, your control functions, your risk functions about what cloud is, what it does, what it doesn't do, and how is it different from your sort of existing landscape.
Yes, I mean, I hear a lot from small business owners and medium companies that it's a bit overwhelming and intimidating actually for them. So there's a lot of misconception around the technology itself. If I may go back to Bassam, Bassam, almost what we've heard resonates across industries. How would you say business should chart, let's say, their cloud journey? Which steps should they go through first? Do you educate your team first? Do you buy a service first and then you train them so they can adopt digital transformation and effectively basically be competitive?
Yeah, so basically, I would say the first step, as was mentioned by Yuri and reiterated by Hassan, is to have a proper planning in place. So the cloud by itself should not be the objective. And obviously this discussion always relates to what the business is trying to achieve and how the cloud, along with analytics and with mobile technologies, can help delivering the business objective. On the second aspect, which is the education of the existing human resources or workforce, I don't believe that we have to educate the full human resources available on the cloud because we can always leverage the hyperscaler or the cloud providers along with the SaaS providers when it comes to the details of the cloud or the SaaS. So I believe more focus should happen on the core business and how to mitigate the risk and generate new revenue streams or develop the existing business models to benefit from the digital transformation.
Bassam, I will add a point here. I think your leaders and your top management, they should have good awareness about your vision. So they will support you and maybe they will force other employees to use cloud services if they believe in your vision.
I fully agree. I fully agree. The transformation should align with the business vision, and the cloud, among other technologies, are enablers for this transformation. Yes.
I would add, I think Mubarak said a very good thing in the beginning in terms of, adoption of cloud is not happening because we just like the word, but mostly because we're trying to solve specific problems. We're trying to solve problems with data sharing, with integration of multiple services. So I think the key point is here, cloud is a solution to a specific business problem. It is not just a hype or one answer which fits all.
Okay, great.
Let me add on this as well. I think maybe the COVID era and what happened during COVID forced people's hands. People were still trying to walk in slowly. All the fears were there. And I think what Ahmed was saying about the getting the management and the vision to push and to understand what you're trying to do happened automatically. I give a simple example. If you think of retailers, people that were working on the malls, the size of the business they were doing from their stores versus the size of the business that we're doing on that online was, highly focused on the stores. Now that when we went into lockdown, stores were closed, so they had to shift. And the only thing that helped them is because of cloud helps you fast react to what happened. It made the decision easier, right? And then you find out, I need to solve my security problems, I need to solve my data problems. And this is how the conversation started moving much, much faster.
Yes, some of them were forced to do it without much knowledge, but they won on the speed and agility and flexibility skill. Hassan, since I have you on, I wanted to quickly ask you about, we hear a lot about hybrid cloud and different offers, you know, public and private cloud. Can you tell us what key differences should a business be aware of before choosing which pathway, especially if they're not so technologically aware of these details?
So, well, let's start by this. The one thing I want to adjust to the question is, it is not a pathway. There is no single answer. It's not one size fits all, right? So you will not make a decision to go just public cloud or just private cloud. And maybe we are big believers in hybrid and multi-cloud. Like you said earlier, right? Everybody's been, or a lot of people have been using Apple phones and Android phones, and you're using the cloud, but you don't know it, right? And then same in the businesses, you will find that you will not be able to bring everything on one cloud. So probably we will have to live in an era where there is different decisions. Some part of your business is going to remain on your data center. Maybe it becomes much smaller than what we have today. Some parts of your applications will be in a private cloud, maybe hosted by a government cloud because of the sensitivity of the data. It is in country and so on. And then a lot of parts of your business is going to go into a public cloud like IBM or Azure or Amazon and so on. So accordingly, the whole idea is you want to make sure that your business and your applications are open and secure and movable. And depending on how fast you need to move, you can shift your workloads from one environment to the other. And this is the flexibility that we're looking for. And maybe the key point for this is the automation part and the modernization. How do I modernize my applications to be able to move from one area to the other, from one domain to the other seamlessly?
Okay, that makes sense. Before I go back to Mbarka, please, Yuri, was there anything you wanted to add on the approach that SMEs should deploy to use cloud technology? This would be our last question on the process or approach before we move on to successes and challenges.
Yeah, I would sort of probably play what Hassan said in a little slightly differently in terms of that of some workloads will definitely require an ability to be sort of movable, right? Especially if you're running something really core to a service, right? For example, you know, think about core banking or think about the very core government services, which will sort of run on a, you know, national cloud provider or government cloud provider in the UAE. You know, probably you want to have a lot of scenarios where you would respond to you want to make sure they're always available, and we'll make sure that you have recovery strategies in place and needed, right? But if you think about majority of the businesses, it's absolutely right, and I'm super aligned with Hassan saying, you know, you need to choose which cloud provider to use, right? You need to choose which provider provides you the best services. Whether for majority of businesses it's that important to move workloads between, let's say, Azure or AWS or IBM, I don't think that's necessarily going to be a massive problem. Mostly because, first of all, it's actually highly complex. And the second thing is that by doing this, you're sort of almost building sort of the common denominator. You're leaving a lot of benefits on the table, right? So you have to be very careful as an SME balance. What do you need? How much skills and capabilities you have? And what benefits you want to get out of this cloud provider. So every business will be slightly different, every workload which will be slightly different. So for my advice for SMEs and for sort of actually probably with smaller enterprise businesses is pick up the right cloud providers for the right type of workloads, maximize the benefits of that, and make sure they obviously respond to your needs for being secure, reliable, productive, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, and I understand you cannot have a one size fit all, as Hassan said, because this is going to depend on the small or medium sized company's goals. What your goals are will specifically determine what service you go through or what tools. I'd like to please go back to the healthcare with Mbarka. Obviously, Mbarka, successful cloud adoption in your sector, in your field, has led and can make interwork between different departments much easier and much more collaborative. Do you think the healthcare industry is able to utilize the full potential of cloud, especially in our region?
Well, adoption is definitely raising up here in the region. It's a long journey. I cannot say it can be done very fast. As we all know, there's a lot of things when it comes to the healthcare regarding the standards that should be built in the cloud setup, regarding the security, which is one of the major risks that is actually being looked at very seriously, the compliance. Also, since the cloud is also offering a huge advanced computing power, all this we are looking at it. Is it really going to be meeting the requirement in the healthcare, especially in the UAE? And whoever is actually going to be a health a cloud provider, they have to understand that they need to look into these things very seriously for them and for us to be able to adopt the cloud very fast in the region. And because, you know, when it comes to the healthcare, the data of the patient is very sensitive, and we're looking into all these factors before we adopt 100% into the cloud technology.
Mbarka, you mentioned something very important. I'm going to take it to Ahmed, please. Specifically, the risk of data and sensitive and confidential information, the breach of privacy risks. Ahmed, you deal with all these risks on a daily basis. We're having to work with the municipality. What can you tell us about the risk and the challenges of security breaches using cloud?
You see, systems and applications have to undergo security and compliance assessment before adopting prior to production. Also, it undergoes more testing for security, capacity, and scalability. Also, as all of us know, all systems and applications should be designed in multi-tier architecture and vertical and horizontal segregation, which will make it more powerful. So I think now we can manage this risk in these days.
Obviously, there's a lot of tools to be used and there's ways to go around it. Let me go to Bassam. You hear a lot, obviously, from businesses facing these challenges, security, as we said, information sensitive data. What do you think have been those biggest concerns facing businesses who are adopting cloud technology during COVID-19 and post-COVID-19? And also, what can you tell us about challenges regarding budgets or human resources? Many companies say, well, cloud is wonderful, but I don't think I can afford it. So,
good. Actually, good question. So I believe there's lots of perception when it comes to cloud adoptions and the barriers to go there. But I would say that the main concern today is regulations when it comes to data privacy or data protection in general, and that data residency within the UAE if we're discussing regulated sectors. So the general rule of thumb here, or what the law regulation says, is that if an entity or a person is entrusted on a secret, he should not use or disclose that secret without the proper consent from disclosing party. Now, what it means for our discussion or in the context that we're talking about, so data is the secret, and it can come in many forms, like personally identifiable information, or in the case of healthcare, protected healthcare information, and so on and so forth. So the keywords here are use and disclose, which means that data analytics and monetization of such data vis-a-vis of what the consumer or the individual is consenting to is obviously not very clear. Now, obviously, we're too creative in the IT industry, and we came with all sorts of data masking solutions and scrambling things. But like Mubaraka mentioned at the beginning of the discussion, laws and regulations are always slower than the way we come with a solution in IT. So I would say the main concern is regulations. On the human resource aspect, I mean, it was discussed in this session already, but I think we should, I mean, organizations should reuse the resources available in the hyperscalers, which are the big public cloud providers and the SaaS providers and the system integrators, and refocus their resources on their core business requirement, be it risk management or new business model generation. And the last piece you mentioned, which is budget,
yeah.
I don't believe that cloud is budget intensive. So you can scale up, you can scale down, you can pay based on consumption, you can experience a new SaaS without the need of buying, and obviously you can move your workloads between your private data center and the public cloud, or use a multi-cloud based on the cost benefit. So yeah. So
Jesse, can I
Yes, I was going to take that to you anyway, Yuri, because I wanted you to answer the same question. How do you basically mitigate the risks that we have heard from the experts now, the risks associated with cloud, as well as making sure that you get a service that is cost effective and beneficial to your goal as a company?
I think that's a great point. And Bassam mentioned some interesting things there, which first of all, I mean, I think education is key, so know the facts before. In terms of security, cloud services, typically the services which are provided by the public or sort of national cloud providers, they're typically more secure than what you can do in your own data center. So you need to make sure you're using them with the right knowledge, with the right skills, and with the right controls. That's a big thing. The second thing about data privacy, I fully agree that the whole idea of how do we use the data, we as an organization, how do we use the customer data, what's the consent story, is a massive problem, a challenge, right? And I think sort of UAE is doing a really good steps forward, especially in banking, where we start talking about open banking regulations. How do we manage customer consent? And healthcare, I think Mubarak will probably say it's a massive challenge. How do you manage customer consent on the health data, and how do you sort of let customers know how to transform and use the data? But what I want to say is that there's a little bit of a false sort of premises that once you're using the cloud, you're giving the cloud provider all your data. Typically, if you think about the public cloud providers or national cloud providers, they don't have access to your data. You host the data there, but it's typically encrypted. The question is, how do you manage your keys? How do you manage your security, et cetera, et cetera? So using the cloud doesn't automatically mean, or in 90% of the cases, it doesn't mean at all that you're giving cloud provider access to your data. So that's something to be learned, et cetera. And I'll have one other comment on the cost. I fully agree with Bassam that cloud does not require a huge amount of capital investment. A typical business case for moving the application to the cloud, if you're doing it in a pragmatic way, it's positive. It gives you savings, and the savings are actually could be quite substantial. I think the only thing which I would recommend people to think about is that cloud model moves your operational spend from capital spend to operational spend. So you're moving from CapEx to OpEx, which could be very good because you have more flexibility. You avoid lock-in from the licensing perspective. You avoid a huge amount of upfront spend, but that means your financial books and your cost profile slightly shifting from, again, capital to operational spending.
Yes, go ahead, Ahmed. Yeah.
We will add one point here. You should have proper plan to save cost. If not the proper plan, you will face a lot of issues with cost.
100%.
Okay, Hassan, with that, yes, I wanted to go to you about this, the cost, because obviously you heard about the concern of budget and cost. But also, may I add to what you're going to say, basically, how do you overcome the challenges of integration with the legacy system that plagues potential customers?
Okay, so I wanted to add a point on what Yuri and Ahmed were commenting on, which is when we're moving the data in the cloud and the concern around the data, now also there are a lot of ways by which you can do all your processing of the data where it is, but still you are on the cloud. So even whether it is the data is being masked, or you are using your applications that are on the cloud to access your data, but your data remains in your data center, or it remains in the country. It does not move around. So technology has facilitated this for us. And maybe to go to your question, I think we developed a framework that basically starts with automation. And I think automation is a key word that we are looking at the moment, because it is the gift of time. The more we help businesses automate, secure, modernize, and predict how their business is going to go, I'm giving them the gift of time. I'm giving their people more time to focus on how to run my business, how to increase my revenues, how to make more profit, how to become a more profitable organization. And I think it all is sitting around the word of automation. How do I make sure that I automate my processes and all the applications I have that have automation that includes also smartness and includes artificial intelligence, so that not every single decision has to go through a person to make it. And the moment this paradigm shift starts becoming a principle in the organization, it helps in accelerating how fast they are really modernizing and going to the future.
Okay, why don't we do, I'd like to have one last question really about the challenges and the risk. I'm going to go to Ahmed, and then we move on to the last section. Ahmed, there's the municipalities in general always face this let's say maybe it's a reputation that they are slower usually in making changes. They have different sets of challenges as municipalities. So do you think cloud adoption makes the implementation in the future of any modern application easier in providing new services?
When it comes to the factor of time, cloud has very big advantage over the services data center, because whole data centers management from procurement, device delivery, installing, configuring, fully managed by cloud service provider, which it will make us flexible and ready when a change made.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, you will, if that's your experience, then that's good news, obviously, for municipalities in the future. I'm going to go to the last section now, which I will start it with Barka, because I'd love to give viewers maybe an outlook of what's coming. All of you have resonated the idea that cloud technology is the way to go. It is the road to simpler services, faster deliveries of services and whatnot, and certainly worth the time and effort. And it's a misconception that it costs a lot. Barka, we talked a lot about remote access, the one of the maybe most known benefits of cloud. It's possibly what has allowed, obviously, within the healthcare industry, cloud computing and improving the number of healthcare related functions, making services faster, telemedicine. There's a lot of benefits in your, and virtual, obviously, virtual medication adherence. What do you think about the benefits that have happened in your sector, and what is the impact that it will have in the future in the region?
Well, actually, the cloud computing has given us and offers us a big improvements when it comes to adopting the new technologies like the telemedicine, the AI, the virtual clinics that we have actually adopted here at the UAE. The pandemic, as everybody knows, made it fast track, so made it adopt these type of technologies faster than we thought about it. But in the same time, saying that the cloud has also given us a way to do the data sharing in more of a simpler, easy way, which actually built into the ease of interoperability. Most of you know that how is now sharing of the data for us made it easier during the pandemic between the institutes. Also, I would like to add that we in the United Arab Emirates are adopting major initiatives like the National Unified Medical Record that is actually going to be implemented at the level of United Arab Emirates, and that is actually requiring a strong coordination and collaboration between all the entities. So the cloud is actually providing us more in the terminology, standards, interoperability, and the ease of sharing these data. These are the things that I've seen it's an added value for us here. And it's making it much, much easier for us to adopt into the cloud technology in the United Arab Emirates. I'll also have said that we're actually also developing very fast. I said at the beginning, it's the technology is much faster than regulation, but actually, having said that, now currently the United Arab Emirates, we're working onto making the legislation and the laws very proactively happening. We've just recently, last year, has done the law for the ICT in healthcare, where we have actually decided around how we can share the data. We've done the standards and we've done the terminologies that should be shared at the level of the UAE. That is going to make it easier for us here in the region to adopt it, because we are adhering to all the standards at all the organizations in the United Arab Emirates.
Barka, the unified records you mentioned, is that Malafi, or you're talking about a different?
It's actually Malafi is the part in Abu Dhabi they're doing. We have then we have Nabut, which is Dubai is doing. The National Unified Medical Record, which we have actually called it Riayati, is the umbrella on top of all of them. It's actually led by the Ministry of Health and Prevention. What we're going to be doing is actually linking later on all of these three HIEs under a single umbrella, where we're going to be having actually accessibility is easy for the service provider wherever they go for the patient tracking.
Certainly, the UAE has definitely led the way in many healthcare services that were provided swiftly and helped to manage COVID-19 crisis, and that's been known around the world. Let me go to Yuri. Yuri, this would be our last maybe question for today. Your outlook on what's coming in the future. Would you say mass cloud adoption is the way forward to succeed in any organization wish to go into digital transformation?
Absolutely. I think sort of conscious cloud adoption is definitely a way forward for any organization, because a few factors. One, it's delivering the agility and speed and time to market. So ability for the organization, whether it's a public sector, healthcare, or financial service organization, to adapt and change the services to what market requires or what the customer requires, or to respond to external conditions which happen in the market. That becomes much, much easier with cloud adoption. So there's definitely one thing. The second thing is that cost and cost efficiency. Essentially, it allows you to focus your skills on what matters to you as a business, rather than on managing the sort of what's undifferentiated complexity, right? So you don't want to manage your servers. You don't want to necessarily, as Ahmed said, configure, install, and run your Kubernetes cluster. You want to build services which matter for you as a business, or which matter for your customers as a business. And I mean, financial services is definitely one of the big opportunity areas. And as Mbarka said, so we have a really good support from the Central Bank of UAE, and there's a lot of work happening in financial services on the national levels, as well as on the more regional levels, on how to drive the regulatory standards, risks, and sort of controls and standardization across the country, which not only talks about the transactional banking, but also talks about machine learning and AI, and how it would take all these advancements, which is a great initiatives happening on the government level around that, and how to apply it to financial services. I mean, for example, we as a bank, as First Abu Dhabi Bank, we formally accepted the cloud-first strategy. That means any new development which we do goes onto the cloud. We will have multiple cloud providers, again, combining the public and national cloud providers together, and doing the proper management of workloads around that. And we believe that we see our data center footprint shrinking quite heavily. Obviously, we don't know the exact numbers yet, because it depends on lots of external factors. But at the extreme, I think we're seeing sort of 90% of our applications and workloads will live in one of these cloud providers. So and we see the other institutions in the country sort of following. So we're a little bit leading at the moment, following the same ideas. So yes, I do believe that our future is in the cloud, and the more people adopt it, the more mature, standard, and more easier it will be to companies to adopt and to use it. I think maybe last point for me is standardization in the cloud market is a massive thing which is still yet to happen on the terms of operational elements, on instrumentation, monitoring, automation, etc. So this is the one thing which everyone is trying to work, especially in the technology industry. There's a body called Cloud Native Compute Foundation, which is sort of helping to coordinate a bit of the services offered by different cloud providers. So once this becomes more mature, I think we'll see more acceleration of this type of work.
Yeah, that makes sense, Yuri. Since you're talking about the future outlook, I'm going to take that to Ahmed. You're at the forefront of the discussion when it comes to smart cities, sustainable cities in the future. And obviously, cloud technology is a big part of that. So would you call for more public and private sectors collaborations as far as being able to achieve the vision of future smart cities?
You see, smart cities is general a shared effort between private and public sector in multiple aspects. As usually, government provide a public platform. And with time, government have noticed that this relation is better established with the cloud services. Moreover, the time and cost, a lot of features they will have from cloud services. A lot of, I mean, technology features. So what Yuri said, so we will add more features and we'll have more features for government and for private companies, inshallah.
Inshallah, and we'll hopefully host you again to see where the future will take us. Before I end with Hassan, because I know Hassan, you have a lot to say, obviously, about the overload you might be facing with this demand from different sectors on cloud. Let me just ask Bassam if you have anything to add on the future outlook of cloud technology.
Yeah, so basically, I do expect that in the upcoming years we will see like a big shift toward the cloud. I think the key here is to align the any digital transformation strategy that's there around either customer experience or around new revenue streams with the cloud first overarching strategy, keeping in mind the multi-cloud. And if I may close the cloud journey, or what we're calling in GBM, the journey to the cloud, is about transforming the businesses to basically a more agile and flexible and scalable business first, I would say, entities.
Great. I'm going to take that to Hassan and maybe conclude with you, Hassan. Everything we have heard from our esteemed panelists today basically says that you in your sector, whether IBM or other companies, are going to face an increased demand on this service, on cloud technology. Would you be able to tell us how are you optimizing your infrastructure to accommodate future growth?
Well, I think the key word here is what Yuri touched on just in his last comment, which is standardization. What IBM started doing, and everybody maybe is aware of the acquisition that we did with Red Hat, is we believe that the microservices infrastructure or platform based on OpenShift for us, for example, is the way in the future where we will standardize a platform that will make us able to optimize the workloads that are coming and consume them. And then you will build your applications, infuse them with intelligence and AI to help optimize everything. And I think maybe to add on what Yuri's vision was on, if you're expecting your data centers to shrink on premise, your own data center, we are also looking into optimizing the workload that you take to the cloud. So it's not a one-to-one migration. It will always depend. Maybe I can save a little bit going to the cloud. And then when I have a heavy workload or an increase in the workload, let's say if I'm a bank at the end of the year or end of the month, I need more infrastructure to work on. It's easy to expand and retract afterwards, which will help us from cost optimization, but also will help with the flexibility to respond to dynamic business needs. Right?
Great. So if I may possibly do a quick takeaway or a recap, what I am able to summarize briefly is to say that you all can agree and concur that cloud technology is the way to go, that cloud technology is not necessarily only for big corporate or certain sectors or public sector. It is customizable, it is adaptable, depending on your needs, depending on your goals as a small or a medium-sized company. You also corrected the misconception that many may have that it is a costly service, and that's not necessarily true. That depends on basically whether you can upscale the service or not, and again, what are your goals in it. And you all agreed that any company, any service, private or public, must go through the proper education and planning and take it step by step and not overwhelm yourself or your staff with all the goals. So thank you so much for these very valuable insights you have given us today. Barka Ibrahim, IT Director at the Ministry of Health and Prevention, Yuri Misnik, Group CTO at First Abu Dhabi Bank, Ahmed Hamadi, IT Director at Abu Dhabi Municipality, Bassam Rashid, Director of Digital Business Solution at GBM, and Hassan Shaheen, the IBM Cloud Sales Leader for GBL and Pakistan. Thank you all so much. And for me, Jason Moore, thank you so much for joining us. This brings us to the end of our first episode of Biz Tech Talk, which was hosted by Forbes Middle East in partnership with GBM. Thank you so much for joining us.